Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here in Mohkinstsis on Treaty 7 territory. I want to acknowledge the Métis people who share a deep connection with this land. My name is Diana Batten, and I'm the MLA for Calgary, Acadia. I am honored to be joined today by Naheed Nenshi, leader of the official opposition, and Arlen Smith, operating partner for Palomino Smokehouse. Before we begin, I want to thank Arlen for welcoming us into the Palomino today. This place is a cornerstone of Calgary's music and hospitality scene. And like so many businesses across the city, the Palomino is feeling the pressure of rising costs. And that's part of why we're here, because the decisions the 2026 budget has made aren't abstract. They affect families, they affect workers, they affect important businesses across our communities like this one. The city is full of talent, opportunity, and hardworking people who work every day to do their best for themselves and for their families. Unfortunately, the UCP's 2026 budget makes life harder for many Albertans and many Calgarians. I hear from families every day across the city who say life has never felt more expensive. And this budget only drives those costs higher. The UCP budget isn't just about a massive deficit with no plan to return to a balanced budget. It also contains more than 30 fees and tax increases that will make life harder and more expensive for all Albertans. To talk more about the budget and its impact on Calgarians, I'll turn things over to Naheed Nenshi.
Well, thank you, Diana. I must say that I love being here at the Palomino, always have, but it is very cruel to put me into the Palomino with those beautiful smells on a day when I am fasting for Ramadan. But maybe I'll come back after sunset, Arlen. The Alberta Advantage. We all want to live in a prosperous province because prosperity is supposed to make our lives better. But what happens when prosperity comes and Albertans, thanks to the choices of their government, are even worse off? That's what we've seen from Danielle Smith, from the UCP, and from Budget 2026. She has near historic resource revenues, 6 times what Rachel Notley had, the strongest economic conditions in a generation, record oil production, and the government still can't balance the budget. The government still can't invest in the things that make lives better for every single Albertan. Deficits sound academic, but they have really real consequences. Today, we spend more on interest on our debt than we spend on public safety, mental health, and the environment combined. And under Danielle Smith's budget plan, Alberta's provincial debt will double in the course of only one government. In short, the UCP wasted the boom during the boom. This budget doesn't make your life easier. It doesn't build what you need. It doesn't invest in making healthcare and education better in the ways it needs to. Instead, we're building a giant debt for ourselves, for our kids, and for our grandkids. The government is bad with money. It's as simple as that. But the impact on Albertans is significant. Under this budget, every single Calgarian will pay more. You'll pay more in property taxes, your rent will go up, you'll pay more as you move through your daily lives, and if you're a senior, if you're a low-income senior, it will be harder and harder for you to access Alberta Seniors benefits. Mayor Farkas has told us that we are seeing the largest property tax in Calgary's history. I think it's kind of funny because the government is forever telling me I increased property taxes, but they increased it more in 1 year than I did in almost my entire term as mayor. An entire electricity and water payment extra per year, $300 to the typical family. And that's in addition to all the other fees and increases in this budget. If you're a tradesperson, your fees are going up. If you're a small business owner, your fees are going up. If you drive a car, your fees are going up. If you drive a truck, your fees are going up. If you're a senior, your fees are going up and your benefits are going down. I want to just dwell on seniors for a second. It's $23 million of cuts to low-income seniors in our province. The government never talked about this. They never mentioned it. It's buried in the budget. But they're making it harder and harder for low-income seniors to qualify for benefits at a time where inflation is still hitting every single one of us. It's cruel, it's unfair, and it attacks among the most vulnerable Albertans and people who built this province. So finally, let's just make sure we have our facts straight. We have near historic resource revenues. Oil production is at record levels. This government is delivering a massive deficit, doubling Alberta's debt, and they're making it more expensive for everyone to live here. In addition to that, we're not getting anything out of it. Today, the Premier is going to make an announcement about new schools. She's been doing it all week. If you look at the small print, there's not $1 for construction of any of those new schools in the next 3 years. It's just planning, planning, planning money, endless planning, endless consultants. That's what this government loves to do. Instead of actually putting shovels in the ground, they want to promise something, but not actually pay for it. They call that program Schools Now. I call it Schools Never. It doesn't deliver those new student spaces until 2032, when the students who are the bulk of the population right now will already be done school. Like Fleetwood Mac reminds us, children get older, and building schools 10 years from now does nothing to alleviate the challenges right now. For weeks, the Minister of Hospitals has been telling us he's building a brand new bed tower, the size of a new hospital at the South Health campus in Calgary. Not $1 for planning or construction. The South Health campus is not even mentioned in this budget in the next 3 years. But that's stuff Diana and I get to talk about. We talk about these impacts all the time. But really, we need to hear from someone who's hit by that, and I'm so grateful that Arlen, at the very last minute, was kind enough to let us not only come to his place, but also to tell you a little bit about the impact of this government on small business. So I'll turn it over to Arlen.
Thanks, Naheed. Thank you, Naheed. I love this city. I love doing business in this city. I love the people who come through our doors every day. But I'll be honest with you, it's tough right now. On a personal front, my day-to-day life is getting more expensive. On a business front, we're facing amazing and unprecedented costs. Food costs have gone through the roof. The price of beef is at a historic high, and I can't blame the farmers. The price of oil is high, but so is the price of diesel. So is the price of farm equipment. So is the price of electricity that they need to operate their farms. And we pay the price for it. Utilities have done nothing increase for us as well. I use a lot of power. You know, we're open 18 hours a day, the lights are on, and I've seen my electricity bills increase massively in the last 3 years. The deregulation of industries such as utilities and electricity, as well as insurance, are costing us, and it makes it hard for us to stay open. Insurance, the deregulation of the insurance industry has been wild. Our insurance rates have increased 100%. I have friends that run businesses where they don't operate within a larger group that have seen it go up to 150% insurance increases for small business. And now with Budget 2026, we're going to see costs rise even higher with this provincial property tax hike. Our mayor has luckily pointed out to us that this 21% hike is historic and it's terrifying. And I haven't seen how it's going to affect my business yet, but I know on a personal level, it makes it pretty scary around my house. We try to shoulder these rising costs as much as we can, but at a certain point, the math stops working for us. And if provincial costs keep climbing, businesses will have no choice but to raise prices. And unfortunately, if we do that, it passes on to our customers, and they're the ones that suffer. I don't want to charge $50 for a plate of barbecue. It's not what we want to do. I'm proud of what we've built here. You know, the people that come here are all very hardworking. They come from an industry that is suffering as well. I mean, It's the costs and pressures we're facing right now just aren't sustainable. When every single input cost is rising and now provincial costs are rising too, it makes it hard to keep going. We're going to. We love Calgary. We love the people of Calgary, and we want to see Calgary and the rest of the province do well while the province is doing so well, or should be doing so well. Thanks for listening to me. I'm going to turn this back over to Naheed to close.
Well, thanks so much, Arlen. And man, I didn't realize that your insurance had gone up so much.
Looks wild.
And everything else, you know. Even for me, given the changes in the last day or two on my drive down here, my gas light came on in my car. Yes, I'm one of those guys, and I was hoping to wait this out. But people are feeling this in a very significant way every single day. And it's the job of government at times like this to make life easier. To make life easier for people every single day, but this budget makes life more expensive. It makes every one of us pay more. Calgarians work hard. We work hard every day. We run businesses. We drive trucks. We go to work in the healthcare system or in education. We start great big businesses. We work in the oil and gas industry. Calgarians power the economy. And for us to be treated like this by this government is unacceptable. What do we get in return for all our hard work? The largest provincial property tax increase in Calgary's history. A government that lays layers of debt on our kids and grandkids and gives us nothing whatsoever to show for it. Calgarians deserve a better government, and we're ready to give them that better government. We'll take questions now.
All right, we're going to start with questions in the room. I'm just going to ask folks to come right up to the mic, state your name and outlet.
Adam McVicker with Global News in Calgary. How would you respond to the province saying this money that's being generated by this education property tax increase is going to directly fund schools, teachers, operating costs, a third of the operating costs for the education budget? How would you respond to that?
Well, the argument here is that it's going to fund increases in education, but it isn't really. The entire global increase to the education budget is just to pay for the agreement that the government imposed on teachers using the notwithstanding clause last fall. It doesn't hire new teachers, it doesn't build new schools in the way that they're claiming it does. It pays for the agreement and it pays for the government's cost of the strike. Remember, they gave everyone a little bit of money during the strike. That's it. The government's own figures show that last year, before they announced that they would hire new teachers, we were still 500 teachers short in the whole system. So they're unable to even hire the people they say they're going to hire. And doing it through the property tax regime, it's obvious what they were trying to do. It's what they always do. They were hoping that people would blame the mayor and blame city council when they get their property tax bill in June. But the mayor's doing a great job of making sure people know exactly who's behind that tax increase, and it is the province. They won't increase their personal income tax or their corporate tax so they can say they're low tax, but they'll do it on the backs of property owners and renters, and I think that's unconscionable.
And my follow-up is also about the education property tax, but more so on the residential side. We have Calgary, Chestermere, and Airdrie. They're all facing provincial property tax hikes of at least 20%. What message do you think that sends to property owners across Alberta who have to face them?
Well, it makes housing more unaffordable. It makes it harder and harder to afford a home. And what I think is really funny is I got my property assessment bill in the mail, as everyone did in January, and Calgary's market assessments are pretty flat after a couple of years of big growth. You know this, you cover City Hall. Yet, the Premier's Chief of Staff says that the tax increase is because of massively increased assessments, and it's the city's fault, as though the city controls the free market. So first, he's wrong, and second, he's wrong, and third, he's wrong. So when we have the Premier's own Chief of Staff not understanding how taxes work, that is a very, very big problem. And it basically, you know, the Minister of Finance has said over and over again that the Alberta advantage is because it's affordable to live here. And yet they're doing everything they can to erode that affordability. Sometimes I think maybe they're doing it on purpose. They want fewer people to move here, so they're trying to make it less affordable. Hopefully they're not doing that. But it's clear that they don't understand the consequences of their actions.
All right, our next question.
Brendan Coulter, CBC.
Hi,
Mayor
Brendan.
Farkas says he wants to see infrastructure funding decoupled from resource revenues. Does Alberta need to change that LGFF funding model?
Yeah, so the local government fiscal framework is something that, frankly, I tried to push for when we were building the city charters in Calgary and Edmonton. The challenge is that the government listened to half of what we were lobbying for, but they set the LGFF at such a low rate that it is impossible for any city to be able to build the infrastructure it needs. It's impossible for any city even to keep up with maintenance of infrastructure with these incredibly low levels in the local government fiscal framework. So yeah, things have to change. You know, when I first became mayor, with then Premier Stelmach brought in the highest levels of infrastructure funding ever to help cities build that infrastructure deficit and build for the future as our populations grew. And not one Conservative or New Democrat government since then has actually given us the money or given cities the money that they were promised way back in 2008, 2009. And ever since then, it's been cut even more by the UCP government. And so it's very clear that we've got to find a better way to fund infrastructure, both maintenance and building for growth.
You've ruled out a PST. You're saying property tax hikes in Calgary are too high. Where is the revenue going to come from for these massive spending needs, but then also to clear up the deficit problem?
Well, the first thing we have to do is not say that this is exclusively a problem that we don't have enough revenue. For me to look Albertans in the eye and say, look, we got to raise more money, I also have to be able to say to Albertans, we're spending every dollar well. And right now, we're just not seeing that in this government. There is unbelievable levels of waste, of fraud, of abuse, of corruption. Just look at the healthcare system. I'll give you two examples. Number one is look at the healthcare system. In the healthcare system, we now have 11 agencies and counting to replace AHS because the Premier didn't like the former Chief Medical Health Officer. So it's absolute chaos in the healthcare system. I can't go anywhere in Calgary without talking to people on the front lines telling me it has never been worse. Diana is a nurse. She will tell you, everyone she talks to says, this is not normal. This has never been worse. So we're paying 11 CEOs, 11 management organizations. We are giving out these bloated contracts. The corrupt care scandal is an example of that, to UCP friends and insiders. 100 million on Turkish Tylenol, 100 million on the botched privatization of labs, untold hundreds of millions or billions on these bloated contracts for private for-profit surgical facilities that people still can't get into. Similarly in education, they're spending so much money on pre-planning and planning all of these schools instead of getting shovels in the ground and saying, look, here are 4 designs for elementary schools, pick one and build it. So the amount of waste through the system is extraordinary. So the issue is we got to deal with that before we can have an honest conversation with Albertans about revenue. It's as simple as that. If you want to ask people for more money, you have to prove you're spending every dollar right first.
All right, we're going to move to Zoom. So our first question comes from Will Vassar, Western Standard. Will, your line should be open.
Thank you for taking the question.
There you are.
Hey, are we going here this time? Perfect.
Yeah, I can hear you well.
Perfect. I want to follow up that last question and push a little more on, so cutting the waste, correct, but where $9.4 billion, there needs to be some additional revenue generated somewhere or cut from somewhere. Where would you like to see it cut from, or where do you think it should be or have been from?
Well, as I said, we don't know just how much the waste and corruption is in this budget. They're very good at hiding it. So it's hard for me to answer that question without really knowing the quantum of the numbers we're talking about. But I will say this. If Alberta's population is increasing at the levels that the Premier says it is, where's the economic growth as a result? Where are the jobs as a result? The best way to grow revenue in a provincial budget is through economic growth. It's through job creation. The unemployment rate has increased significantly since Danielle Smith has been the Premier, and what we're not seeing is the benefit of economic growth. So sure, oil production is at the highest possible levels, higher than it's ever been, but where are the jobs associated with that? Where are the taxes associated with that? Where is this government's economic development plan? In the budget, the only thing they talk about in terms of economic development is AI data centers. There's a recent case of an AI data center in Ohio, which received hundreds of millions of dollars in public funding and got 10 permanent jobs. That's it. So what we need to see throughout this government is a strategy that creates jobs and builds revenue without necessarily increasing taxes, in addition to spending the money better.
Do you have a follow-up, Will?
Yeah, my follow-up is in the budget as well. It talks about the challenge that the unstable trade relations with the United States
Yes.
have and how that affects kind of the revenue. How do you feel that that should affect revenue, or is that a bit of a cop-out?
Yeah, Alberta's not an island. And even if we were a separate state, we would certainly be even more subject to the whims of the world economy. So right now, you know, some Albertans are happy, not those who have to fill gas, but some Albertans are happy with the increase in the world oil price because of the instability and the tragedy going on in the Middle East right now. But at the same time, you can't bank on that. So similarly, Alberta is probably the most protected province from tariffs, trades, and the end of CUSMA. But we have to make sure that we're advocating for ourselves and for all of Canada as part of a bigger whole, so that we at least have some negotiating power, some bargaining leverage. The Premier would give all that up. She'd rather go to Mar-a-Lago and beg the President of the United States for a little help. Obviously, her strategy didn't work in any way, made life worse for farmers, made life worse for ranchers, made life worse for the average Albertan. So now it's time to be part of Team Canada and to work hard on a trade agreement that protects and enhances Alberta. I will tell you one other thing, which is Premier Scott Moe, the Conservative, small c Conservative, the Sask Party Premier of Saskatchewan, led a trade mission to China. He advocated for those canola farmers. And I'm spending some time with farmers lately who are so happy that 11 shipments of canola are already on their way to China. What did Danielle Smith and her agriculture minister have to do with that? Absolutely nothing. They were so busy cozying up to Trump, they didn't look for victories for our farmers and producers in other places. So that's the kind of thing we got to be smart and tactical about, and that's what this government hasn't been able to do.
Our next question is from All Alberta. Catherine, your line should be open.
Yeah, good morning.
Hi, Catherine.
So speaking of oil, today CNRL had its year-end report, and they told investors that they are shelving the $8.25 billion capital spend for the expansion of the Jack Pine mine due to regulatory uncertainty around carbon pricing and methane. And so I'm hoping to get your hot take on that multi-billion-dollar project being shelved due to the lack of regulatory certainty.
So you're getting a super hot take, Catherine, because this is the first I'm hearing of it. But look, regulatory uncertainty is a serious issue. And the Premier claims that with her MOU, she solved all those problems, but of course she hasn't. And the two things that you suggested, which is industrial carbon pricing and methane pricing, are the things that Premier Smith gave up in order to get that MOU. She said she would make a deal on those things with the federal government. A deal is due on April the 1st, just 3 weeks from now. We're hearing that those negotiations are not going well, that the government will probably blow that deadline. I hope that's not true, because for many, many years, I've been pushing for regulatory certainty. And I've been pushing for the federal and provincial government to stop fighting with one another and to actually sit down and create a system of regulations where everyone who's making investments will be able to say, all right, this investment pencils out or it doesn't pencil out based on this regulatory certainty. So we're aiming for that. But when we have a government that just wants to pick fights with the feds all the time instead of looking at its own house and cleaning up its own regs, it gets harder and harder to do that. So this is yet another example of investment fleeing. We've seen many of these examples. And this is a real challenge for this government. Their pandering to separatists makes people less likely to invest here. Their inability to actually make deals with the federal government makes it harder for people to invest here. And that $8 billion from CNRL, that's a lot of jobs. And so if I were the Premier, I would make that priority number one to figure out how to get investments like that back in Calgary, back in Alberta, I should say. And we've just not seen that from this government.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, a second unrelated question related to intergovernmental squabbling. At the tail end of yesterday's Calgary Council meeting, the mayor had thrown out the idea of a plebiscite to end transfers to the province. And I'm wondering what should happen in terms of that provincial tax collection. I know it's always sticks in the craw of municipal politicians, but what should happen with the property tax collection?
Well, you know, much as I love telling the mayor how to do his job, it is his job, and so I will stay away from telling him how to do his job, though I did quite enjoy what was coming out of that meeting yesterday, I'll tell you that much. Here's the issue. The provincial property tax, well, the property tax in general is a really regressive tax. It's not a great way to tax people. But we've never been willing to have a real conversation about what you could replace it with. You know, do we get rid of the property tax entirely and replace it with a municipal consumption tax? No, I don't think people love that idea. What about a municipal income tax that's tied to the provincial income tax? Can we save money on the whole tax collection side of the business? You know, maybe. But these conversations require people of honesty and goodwill on both sides to have the conversation. The problem right now is that provincial governments for years have been politicizing the property tax. They've been reducing their take if they're kind of mad at the mayors so that they can blame the mayors for increasing taxes. Or in this case, you have a finance minister who said, wow, we've been reducing our take of the property tax, so we're not even collecting 1/3 of the education budget, which was the plan through these property taxes. But now he's increasing them massively over just 2 or 3 years, which is a huge hit on people. So I think the answer to your question, Catherine, is that there is a policy answer here, but it requires the politics to be taken out of it. And I see no desire from this provincial government to take the politics out of it, to have a real conversation about how to reduce people's tax load and fund the things that people need.
Our next question is from City News. Carly, your line should be open.
Hi there. A bit off topic. Forever Canadian is starting to build a coalition of groups to oppose Alberta separatism. Would you and the NDP be willing to formally partner with Mr. Lukaszuk as we get closer to a potential referendum? And why hasn't this happened yet as you appear to align?
Look, I'm very proud of what Forever Canada has been able to do and what Mr. Lukaszuk started. I think he himself is a bit surprised at the huge amount of wave of people who've gotten interested in that conversation. I believe that fighting for Canada transcends politics, it transcends partisanship. We should have people of every political stripe who love this nation standing up for this nation. I will play a very large role in these conversations going forward. I have to. I'm a proud Canadian, and someone has to stand up for Canada because Danielle Smith sure as hell isn't doing it. And I'm thrilled that Tom Lukaszuk is doing it. I'm thrilled that Jason Kenney is doing it. Jason Kenney's line is, and I might steal it, lead, don't leave. I think this is really important that Albertans of every stripe see this. Yes, it would be nice to coordinate. We don't know what the rules are. The legislation is very vague around what third-party advertisers can do, what individuals can do, what political parties can do. But I hope that all of us who love Canada will find a way to work together and make sure that that message gets out to all Canadians. To me, that's critical, and I praise everyone who's doing that work right now.
Do you have a follow-up, Carly?
Yeah, what do you make of the fact that a lot of Albertans still don't know where their UCP MLA stands on the issue?
I'm choosing my words carefully because it's Ramadan and I shouldn't think evil thoughts. That sucks. If you are a representative who is elected by the people who elected you and those who didn't vote for you deserve to know where you stand on the future of this country. And for UCP caucus members to play footsie with this, to try and pander to the separatists while pretending to be Canadian, is totally unfair. We have a pledge. All it says is, I am a proud Albertan, I'm a proud Canadian, and I oppose separatism. That's all it says. It's not a trap. Every single member of my caucus has signed it. One of the independent members of the legislature didn't sign it, but said he agrees with it. Not one UCP member, not one, has said that they oppose separatism. Certainly not the Premier, certainly not any of her cabinet ministers, certainly not any of her caucus members. They're being whipped to not say they oppose separatism. And what we know is we have a separatist premier leading a separatist party that is a separatist government. And surely some of those caucus members, surely some of them feel uncomfortable because they weren't elected on this. And maybe they're not separatists in their own heart. But the premier is so scared of her own political skin, she won't let her own caucus members say what they believe in. And if you are a UCP caucus member and you are shocked that you're in a separatist government, I'm telling you right now, there are options. You don't have to stick around, because this is not what you ran for. This is not why people voted for you, and it's time to be honest with your constituents.
Right, we've got time for a few more questions here. We're going to go to CTV. Tyson, your line should be open.
Thanks for taking my question. Leader Nenshi, I know it's a new year, a new month. We got water restrictions coming in Calgary on Monday as work on the Bears Claw feeder main begins again. As you are aware, of course, the province has blamed you. Some Calgarians have even blamed you as your from your time as mayor on council for potentially kicking the can down the road when it came to repairing or upgrading this pipe. Have you done any reflection to look back at whether or not you should have done more on the pipe when you were mayor of the city of Calgary?
Yeah, I mean, look, every single study has completely exonerated the mayor and council for any of those decisions. That pipe exploded. It wasn't leaking in advance. It wasn't collapsing in advance. It exploded one day. And there was nothing you could have done to prevent it. Now, what council could have done is invested $1 billion on building a new pipe as the city grows. And when the economy really cratered in 2015, council decided, look, let's keep things affordable. We don't need that for a little while. We can defer building that new pipe because the old one's working fine. And in the end, we probably should have built that new pipe. But that would have led to real increases on people's water bills because we had a provincial government that wasn't funding infrastructure at that time. So that was a decision that council made. Would we have done it differently knowing what we know now? Well, hindsight is 20/20. But the critical thing is, look, the UCP's been on a huge fishing expedition. They cost the city maybe $1 million to find every single piece of paper that might have had my name on it. And they found nothing, literally nothing. And I just keep asking Calgarians a simple question. Would the UCP be spending so much time and energy blaming me if I wasn't the leader of the opposition? The answer, of course, is no. It's purely political on their part. They're never interested in solving the problem. They're interested in scoring political points, and this particular one has not landed for them at all.
Do you have a follow-up, Tyson?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you so much.
All right, we're going to go to Rajesh Angral from Sabang. Rajesh, your line should be open.
Hi, good morning, Naheed and team members. So it's excellent to have you listening about the budget. And I was looking at the data in the last year when Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion project completed. After that, Alberta's capacity goes from 300,000 barrels per day to 890,000 barrels per day, and we got record production of this thing. And in October itself, up to that time, we were having a 1.1 billion barrel of oil, and almost $10 billion growth we saw in since the launch of this pipeline. Even though we are seeing, it looks like when you are asking for something, your dream come true, and your dream is true, and now finally still you are in the debt because you are still going under the deficit when the budget is coming. So, and same time now, again, Premier is blaming on the immigrants and the oil. What would you like to say about this, like how she's treating the immigrants and this oil?
Sure, there's a couple things there, Rajesh, and I'll take them both. The first is, look, the only thing that's even keeping us afloat in terms of a budget, barely afloat right now, is the fact that Rachel Notley got the Trans Mountain Pipeline built. And that massively increased our export capacity outside of the United States. So it's important for us to continue to work on market access. It's critical, but remember, Conservative governments in this province and federally over the last 40 years have built precisely 0 miles of pipeline to Tidewater, 0. It was Rachel Notley and the federal government that got the Trans Mountain Pipeline built, with an able assist from the then mayor of Calgary. And we need to be able to get more and better market access. But the UCP cancelled the oil by rail contract, costing us untold billions of dollars. They have put all their chips into a North Coast British Columbia pipeline where there are solutions that we can get moving on right away. And we need to get better market access for all of our products in really smarter ways than this government has been doing, and it's something I'm really focused on. The second issue, of course, is that the Premier continues to blame immigrants for everything. Her own budget documents show clearly that over the last decade, our rate of growth in Alberta was actually lower than average. There were 2 years in which we had really, really high growth, 23 and 24. It's already gone down to below average levels. And in 23 and 24, what was this Premier doing? She was asking for Alberta to double its population. She was asking that Red Deer go from 100,000 odd people to 1 million people, 10 times its population. She launched the Alberta is Calling campaign, paying people $5,000 to move here. And now she blames immigrants. It's so wrong. And these anti-immigrant referenda that will come to us in October are just meant to get people angry and meant to distract people from her terrible, terrible record. And it will backfire. Because as always, she thinks Albertans aren't very smart. She thinks Albertans can be manipulated. But Albertans are way smarter than you give us credit for, Premier, and we know exactly what you're doing.
Do you have a follow-up, Rajesh?
Yes, and that's wonderful. And you have seen recently a lot of prices are going up, groceries, insurance, and everywhere we are going. People were just struggling with that, and now recently, due to this war, Trump war, basically what he created, and due to that we have oil prices are going up, and people are struggling more with everything now. And on top of that, Premier has put the extra property taxes on our properties in Calgary. So I think how we will manage these things. Everyone is looking for Premier as well as for the government to cut some things, but she's putting extra burden on us. So what would you like to say about that?
Look, under 7 years of UCP government, life has gotten infinitely more expensive for Calgarians. And there's nothing, since I've been in this leadership role, the UCP has not passed a single bill that actually reduces people's cost of living. For example, in the fall, we put forth a motion that was a common sense motion that's been done in other jurisdictions to end the practice of shrinkflation at the grocery store. The UCP voted it down. Every single time we bring up another affordability measure, the UCP votes it down. And we know, as from talking to Albertans over and over again, cost of living is the #1 issue in people's minds. Look, I believe something simple. You work hard and you go to work every day. You shouldn't be scared when you get to the till at the grocery store. Last Saturday, I was driving in Northeast Calgary. It was a bitterly, bitterly cold day. And I saw a few hundred people, maybe 500-600 people in line at the Whitehorn C-train station in this incredible cold. And I didn't know what they were in line for. So me being me, I pulled over, stopped to talk to people and see what was going on. They were in line to get a food hamper from the Guru Nanak Free Kitchen. They go out every Saturday. People had been in line for 4 to 5 hours in this bitter, bitter cold just to get enough to eat. And that day they served nearly 4,000 families. Calgary's still the richest city in Canada, and 1/3 of Calgarian households don't have enough to eat every month. This is the result of the choices of this government. They're more interested in scoring political points and padding the pockets of their friends than actually running a government focused on Albertans' priorities. We deserve better.
We're going to do one last pass for questions in the room.
Hi there, Michael, Global News. You talked a little bit about the referendum here. Take us behind the scenes in terms of what does organization look like? I got a text from one of your volunteers just yesterday. When they're going through, they're sending out these text messages trying to get people organized and ready to go. How are you campaigning on this? What does this look like, since it's not an election, but it kind of feels like one?
Yeah, this is very behind the scenes, but I'm happy to share a little bit. I'm really worried about this because I think that the Premier has unleashed forces she cannot control for 3 reasons. Number 1 is referenda are inherently unpredictable. While there has been no poll that shows that support for separation in Alberta is above 30%, that's roughly where Brexit was polling. When David Cameron said that he would bring in this referendum, and he said it would never pass, but it would give him leverage to make a better deal with the European Union. That's exactly the language that Premier Smith uses, but I don't think she read to the end of the Brexit book. Number 2 challenge with referenda is that they freeze investment. No one will invest in Alberta until that referendum is done with, because they don't want to invest if they don't know what country they're investing in. No one's going to build a pipeline if they don't know if it has to cross an international border to get to British Columbia. So it's going to freeze job creation, it's going to freeze investment, it's going to make life harder for Albertans. But number 3 is that it pits neighbor against neighbor. It makes people angry. And it's hard to repair that kind of divisiveness. The UCP is not interested in repairing the divisiveness. The UCP is interested in more division and more anger. That's what they thrive on. But the rest of us have to figure out how to live together and work together and create a better Alberta together. So I'm worried about it. So I've spent a lot of time over the last several months just talking to people who've been through referenda, who've been through Brexit, who've been through Scotland, who've been through the Quebec referenda. And the one piece of advice I've been given is you can't sleepwalk into this. You got to organize, and even if the polls are on your side, you got to make sure that you're treating it like an election campaign. So that means that folks like Tom Lukazik and Jason Kenney, as well as myself, will be out there. We're going to have volunteers, door knocking. We're going to share information. We're going to probably have lawn signs and get out the vote campaigns and so on, because we have to. We cannot rely on this just going away, because the Premier has, by making it easier for them to get their signatures, by pandering to the separatists, has put us in a really dangerous position. And even though she's going to come out at the end and say, no, I stand for Canada and I will campaign for Canada, she will do so half-heartedly at best. And so someone else has got to pick up the slack for the mess she created.
So that being said, if we see the results and they are what they are, do you take that as a mandate one way or another to, again, push on the Premier to call an election based on the results?
The best thing to do would be for the Premier to, as my deputy leader says, cut the BS and call an election now. She didn't campaign on any of this stuff. And if she believes she needs a mandate, then call an election. We're ready. We will run that election and we will win that election. We're ready to do it right now. And I bet you any amount of money that the Premier has not thought for 1 second about the day after the referendum. What happens if it passes? What happens if it fails? Either solution means that she's lost her mandate and her moral authority to govern. I think she's lost it already by making it easier to have a referendum. Call an election now, call an election later, we're ready.
And with that, we conclude our press conference. Thanks so much, folks.